Hello, everyone. Welcome to Small Town Big Life, a podcast. Coming at you from the bait shop behind Grace Fellowship Church in Avis, Pennsylvania. Today I'm talking to two friends of mine, two very bright guys, Dave Lindsay and Kevin Johnson. Dave's a physician. I know he's taught in college level, and Kevin's worked on secret spy missions for NASA. And we're going to get started right now. We're talking about God and science. I know the introduction, I fell short on some of the facts, so we're going to have the guys introduce themselves and tell a little about themselves. Why don't you go first, since you're on that side of the table?
All right. My name's Kevin Johnson. I have an education in computer science, which isn't exactly science as far as what we're going to be talking about, but it has given me a 30-year career of a lot of different things, starting with satellite communications, unrelated to NASA, by the way. And those were the secret and top secret things. Submarines, I got to work on sonar systems, although inland, I never actually got to go on one. And I was in Florida for a while working for Harris Space Systems and NASA, as you mentioned. That was a revised space shuttle launch system and some test software for the International Space Station. Helicopter systems, that was fun. That was in, where was that? That was Vermont. And then I moved from there to aircraft engine controllers, which, if you've ever heard of the black box, the aircraft engine controller is the equipment that feeds the black box. It collects all the information from around the aircraft. Then I went to intelligence and information systems, mostly unclassified, but the data that it processes is highly classified. So, and then I finally ended up back with satellite communications related to the GPS OCX, which means the operational control next generation for the GPS satellite system.
That's a lot.
Okay. I have no idea what he's just said.
I don't either, but we need smart people. I know you're a smart person. Talk about yourself a little bit.
Well, there's not much to tell. I certainly can't equal that.
Yeah, it's hard to rival that.
I was born and raised in California. I went to Brigham Young University for my degree, and got a degree in English literature with a minor in chemistry. I later went and got my master's degree in theology from University of San Diego, and then I got a medical degree. I've never been in a submarine, but I've been underwater.
That's two of us.
Yeah, I've been underwater. Never worked on anything secret other than what my wife has told me, and of course, that remains secret. I've been a physician for 35 years. Before that, I was actually a police officer in the city of San Diego for a short time until I was injured, and that's when I decided to go to medical school. And that's about it. A really, really uneventful life.
No, I wouldn't call that uneventful. That's quite eventful, I would say. This is great. I like. Someone told me once. I said this the other day. If I'm the smartest man in the room, I'm in the wrong room. So I'm glad to be in the room with you guys to talk about God and science. And I've personally been involved in. I filmed a debate with a friend of mine who is an atheist. He's a pretty smart guy, and we talked for a long time. And I want to get some perspectives and let that kind of be, the loose topic. We've talked, obviously, outside of the podcast because we're all friends, and we've had some pretty interesting conversations. So I would kind of like to start there. And, I guess the first question I have, because we all encounter this in life, especially when if you're Christians like we are, what's the first thing you think of when you are watching a television show or talking with someone and the topic of God and science comes up? We'll start with you, Dave. What's the first thing that goes through your head?
When I think of God and science, when I hear it, well, of course, the first thing that comes to my mind is there's some antipathy between them. And I presume that's what we're here to talk about today is there any antipathy between God and science? Of course, I'm I have a tendency not to watch those kind of shows, especially if they do show prejudice one way or the other, because I'm of a different school. I presume you guys are probably pretty much the same school I am, I would imagine. But that's what I think about is the rivalry or the hatred sometimes even between religion or God and science. And I hate to use the word God as opposed to science. I'd rather use the word religion because I don't think God hates science. I don't think God hates scientists.
No.
But religion is the biggest problem, and I think that's where we need to start: is how we're defining God, or are we saying God and science? Or are we saying religion and science? Because there's a distinct difference between what God likes and what religion likes.
Right. Like I always say, science is the language of God. That's how I describe it. I don't think the two are separate, but it's like you said, there are people that will become downright hostile if they want to stand strongly in one camp, and they look at it like they have to stand in one camp. They don't. I mean, to common Christians, normal people, not the type that are represented on the news as wackos, but to normal, upright thinking Christians, I think that we all look at it like science is really just God's blueprints, and we're afforded the opportunity to examine that. And I think that the pursuit of knowledge, God wants us to do that. You agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. Absolutely, I agree. I agree that God is behind science. And I think I agree with Galileo and Copernicus and all of the old Newton. They all believed in God. And it's interesting to read their writings. And all of them in their introductions, every single one of them say that I've discovered all of this and I did it for the glory of God.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think we've lost that in our especially in our scientific communities and some of our radical brethren in the Christian faith or other faiths as well.
Be careful on the table. It makes big thumps on the mic.
Oh, am I been thumping?
It picks up a little bit.
I didn't mean to thump.
No. I agree with you 100%. Kevin, what's your take, Kevin?
Well, I agree. The first thing I think of is the history of the conflict, starting with Copernicus, who was smart enough to wait till the end of his life to publish his
So he didn't get burned?
Yeah, he knew it. He knew what was coming. And then Galileo, and it throughout the Middle Ages, and all of the scientists were Christians. I mean, because they were the educated people, the priests. They had the time and the education to pursue scientific discoveries, and in a lot of cases, they were doing that specifically to be better able to identify miracles. Because if they didn't understand the natural world, anything looks like a miracle. If you don't understand it, God did it. That led to, the development of the God of the gaps theory, where he just fills in where there's an absence of human knowledge. And that, I think, is the source of a lot of problems, where religion has inserted God into the gaps of human knowledge. So as human knowledge increases, their God diminishes, and that causes some serious conflicts because they don't like that.
Well, especially, you mean scientists don't like that?
Well, no.
There's not an answer in science.
Christians don't like that when, because as human knowledge expands, the Christians are the ones who have defined God only to fill in the gaps of knowledge, and so as knowledge increases, the gaps get smaller.
So as you're saying, as the scientist comes along, and of course science is growing exponentially.
Exactly.
And the more we find out, the more questions we have. And every time we have a question, you ask a scientist, well, why? And they're going to say, I don't know. The Christian is going to say, well, God did it.
Right.
Being that's the God of the gaps.
Filling in the gaps.
Filling in the gaps.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And that scares. We had a discussion before about how that scares some people away from the faith. And I know I've brought it up in sermons before. We want our young people to ask questions and to be inquisitive and to seek the acquisition of knowledge. But there are some churches, through the philosophies of their teaching, or maybe it's pride or arrogance, when a young person might ask a question, and the authority figure for the church says, well, because God decided it to be that way, and God is not to be questioned, and don't ask any more questions, that's bad. And we know centuries ago you got killed for that. And that's kind of what you're talking about, filling in the gaps, right? If you can't explain something, instead of having the courage to say, I don't know, you just say, well, that's a God matter, and don't question God, and move along now, right?
Yeah, and don't look any further
because that's right. When we used telescopes to peer into space, you were a heretic, and it showed you didn't trust God and His creation, and you weren't believing the Earth was flat, and such things like that. When I hear God and science, I always think about as time goes by, the line of division that atheists are becoming hostile about it. They're the ones who have to separate those two things. The Christian, I think, accepts those two things as harmonious. Like I said, God, science is the language of God, and I think atheism is a religion now. I mean, they're really hostile about getting their point across. They say they don't hold any religious beliefs, but if you watch how they act when they have these discussions, man, they're passionate about trying to disprove God through science. So,
how are you defining religion then?
Well, I would say your spiritual beliefs. I would say, and when I say that, I'm talking about from their perspective.
But an atheist doesn't have a spiritual belief. Or are you saying they do?
No, I'm saying. I see what you're saying. Yeah. In other words, they treat their atheism as we treat our faith. They hold it close to their heart. They feel the need to tell others. They feel the need to get others to get on board and believe it. They feel passionate about it. If you think about what atheism is, if I didn't think there was any God, I wouldn't spend any time debating someone about it. I wouldn't go to rallies. I wouldn't go to bullhorns. I would disengage. I don't feel like I need to go out into the world and speak on all the things I don't believe in. I wouldn't go out and speak against unicorns or dragons or anything else that I don't believe in. It's a waste of my time. And there are atheists in the modern day age on radio, television. If you're a Christian and you show up to speak somewhere, anywhere, I don't care, any university that you're going to go to, and you're going to go there under the banner of the Christian Dr. Dave Lindsay, atheists are going to show up to debate you. I mean, because they're passionate. They have the same passion that people who believe in Christ do. Do you agree with that?
Yes, as long as you're defining religion as a passion or a trust in something, be it non-trust in that there is no God versus someone who is quote-unquote religious, they believe there is a God. So when you're talking about religion, you're talking about a person's trust or belief system in whatever it may be.
Postulating. Well, right. It's a little tongue-in-cheek. I mean, atheism is a religion and something they hold with a lot of conviction that they want to spread.
Okay. Well, that would define Christians too, would it not?
That's what I mean. We're labeled under religion, where they say, if you talk to an atheist, they say, well, I don't have any religion, I'm an atheist. And I'm saying, well, your actions are the way you conduct yourself when you talk with me. That is a religion unto itself, because you want me to get on board with what you're saying. As a Christian, I want you to come to Christ. I want you to accept Jesus as your Savior. That's part of my mandate from God, is to help save people. Atheists aren't given any mandate, yet they act as if they are, because they really want to convince others that they're right about their worldview.
I think there's, at least in my experience, the atheists who are outspoken are former Christians for the most part. I think they have that religious tendency because, for whatever reason, they feel that they've been lied to by religion and they turn away from it and they're angry. And that is what motivates their atheism. I'm not so sure that just an average atheist who's never believed in God and never had a religion, they're the type that just disengage and don't care. But the ones I've seen are all former Christians who are very aggressive in trying to denounce Christianity.
That's an interesting point. I would say that a great many of them that I've encountered and had a discussion with are too. I mean, in other words, were Christians at one time. It's difficult to debate. So in essence, you're saying they're angry with God, and so they either want God to not exist. Because they show up and talk to Christians, and nothing gets done.
Rabbit season. Duck season.
The whole thing sounds like that. The whole thing, that's what the whole conversation is, and it gets exhausting.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think I agree with that. Has that been your experience, Dave? Do you a lot of people?
Well, I met both kinds, yes.
Yeah.
But I find the most passionate are those who were ex-Christians, who really, in my opinion, are still Christians. They're just mad at God.
Yeah.
That's all it is. They're just simply mad at God. And if you really pin them down, they believe in something, but they don't want to.
Right.
They don't want to believe in the Christian God.
Yeah.
And they're mad at the Christian God for whatever reason. And they blame God for whatever happened
Yeah.
in their life.
Yeah.
So I'd agree definitely with a good friend over here, the insurance man, that yes, the most passionate ones are definitely those who are former Christians. I'm not going to say non-believing Christians. I'm going to say former Christians with a chip on their shoulder.
Yeah.
The ones that I've listened to in debates with various people like Sean McDowell and the Christian apologists, they're not so much mad at God as they are at religion, at the teachings that were driven into them all, and then they, for whatever reason, they start to get other information, other interpretations of Scripture, and they feel like they were lied to by the authority figures in their life. Not necessarily God, but religion.
So this goes back to the idea that we were talking about a few minutes ago, I think is what you're saying. Are you saying that when the church says, just shut up and mind your own business, if we can't answer the question, that's a God thing? And so are you saying that then these people are like, well, you know what? If you're not going to be straight with me and you're just going to lie to me about stuff, then we're done here because your religion's garbage.
Exactly. That's
yeah. I agree with that. I agree with that. I think not enough churches have the courage to say when we don't know something. I mean, I do believe the Bible. I trust the Bible. I have faith in the Bible. I also understand that I'm constantly learning when I read it, and I'm constantly learning about the nature of God. And I think it's highly irresponsible if you're someone, especially an institution that is to profess the Word of God, that's afraid to say, well, we don't know yet. We just don't know. I would rather tell somebody I don't know than just tell them, stop asking questions. That's irresponsible. I think it's a common practice. I don't think it's handled. Well, I think it's handled now more elegantly than it used to be. Another cop out I've heard pastors do is, I'll pray about it. I mean, I'll pray about it and get back with you or something like that. I think, well, come on, no, engage me in a talk here. Tell me, what are your thoughts on it? For example, I don't know, questions you get all the time, not even as a pastor, just as a Christian, like, well, how did they get all those animals on that ark? That doesn't make sense. And then they start giving you the specs and the likelihood that 2 of each kind and 4 and 5 of each, some kinds, and how would you? They start going through the logistics of the ark and to tear it down, and then there are some who would say, quit asking questions. The Bible said it happened. So if you question it, you're a heretic. And I think that's irresponsible. I think it's responsible to say, you know what? That's an interesting question. We should look into that. Let's dig out the text and see what the original Hebrew says and that kind of thing. So you're looking at me like
the historical critical version of hermeneutics.
Sometimes I really think that my dog just doesn't like me.
like my mind is somewhere else or something.
No, my mind is right here.
No, not your mind. I thought you were looking at me like my mind was somewhere else.
No, you were talking about Noah's Ark and all the things that are, 2 by 2 and so on and so forth. And I was sitting here thinking, why in God's name did he allow fleas? Of all the things he could have let in, why did he let fleas and mosquitoes?
Yeah.
But But that's a different issue.
Yeah, that is. I think that came with the fall when the world was. Anyway, I'm not going to get down that rabbit hole, but you're right. That's a different issue.
Especially the fleas that cause the Black Death. And
Yeah, stink bugs don't.
50%.
Stink bugs serve no purpose. They're useless. They're not even from here. They're from Asia.
I know.
I'm sure maybe in that climate they serve some purpose. I don't know, but they don't here.
I have no idea.
They help Lowe's sell bug bags, I think, and sprays.
That don't make no sense.
I think that I think, I don't know what their purpose is. All right, I'll get off bugs. Back to what you were going to say.
I wasn't going to say anything. I was waiting for you.
Oh, I was done.
You were done?
I think so.
Oh, okay. But that still gets us back to, are we going to talk about religion and science, or are we going to talk about God and science?
Well, I mean, we can talk about whatever you want, Dave.
There's a difference between God and science and religion and science.
Right.
Because religion is full of people.
That's true.
God is just God.
Yeah.
And you say God is the language of, God speaks the language of science. And you're saying then that God is science.
No, God is love. But God, I mean, everything that God is more than what we're able to comprehend, I think. I think in human terms and human language, the most common phrase and understanding actually that we have is to say God is love. I mean, I know I got borrowed tens and thousands of dollars for guys with PhDs to tell me what is God to you. And at the end of the class, it's God is love. Okay, we're done today. I mean, obviously, we go down a way more theologically complicated path than that.
That's a very complicated path, but we're talking about science.
Right.
Now, is God in science?
God, like I said, science is the language of God. You and I speak and spit and air and bubbles come out. When God speaks, substance comes out because that's what the Bible says. And I think it's difficult for us to understand that. So when I say God and science, I think it's from my perspective is society at large. When you encounter people that want to use use science to dismiss God, what are your reactions as someone who is a believer? And then, religion, I mean, that's another topic. It includes that as well, because, I mean, there's not every religion can be right.
No.
So, and there still are sects of people and belief systems that commonly practice this don't question anything philosophy and just believe it. I think that's wrong. I think the more we learn scientifically, the larger God gets and the more majestic and immense and powerful and impressive, whatever, that God gets. And I think that people are doing a disservice to believers when they try to keep them away from science and say it's of the devil. There's still people that act like they did in the old days. When they would burn people at the stake for proposing the world is round or looking at, these people weren't doing anything against God. They were just trying to learn. So when you say, am I talking about God and science or religion and science? I mean, I would say it's all encompassing.
Yeah, but in the Bible, it also says God is light, and therefore God is just a self-propagating electromagnetic wave, right?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, right. That's I get that.
I think it's in John, although we could look that up.
I like the way you talk.
That was a joke, by the way.
Yeah,
That's a joke, boy. You missed it. Went right past you.
All right. So what do you? Let's see. We got a list. We're high tech here. See, we got a list. How would you argue the reality or existence of God to someone who uses science to dismiss it? Have you met people like that, Dave?
Oh, heavens, yes.
What do you say? How do you respond?
People who use science to dismiss God.
Right, the existence or reality of God. Yeah.
Oh my, that's an involved process. It's not something I just look at them and say no. Most of the time, that's what I do because I don't want to particularly engage them. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, I handle it very bluntly and say you're dead wrong, and as simple as that. And if you'd like to spend more time talking about it, I'll be glad to do it. But you're talking about an hour or two conversation. You're talking about Big Bang. You're talking about Berlin-Guth theories and second law of thermodynamics and so on and so forth. And none of that actually proves God.
Right.
God, you can't prove God by science. You can't disprove God by science. Science is an observational industry. It has to be observed. It has to be tested, and it has to be retested, and it has to work. Whereas religion or God doesn't need any of that. God just is, whether we test him or not. Whether he can't be tested, as a matter of fact, it'd be impossible to come with an experiment to prove God.
Right.
There's some things that God can't do. He can't make a parallelogram into a triangle. I mean, he just can't do it. One's got 4 sides and one has 3 sides. But we can't. Boy, that's not one that I answer other than being very, very blunt and saying you're dead wrong. Let's make some time. And if you have 2 or 3 hours, then we can go through all those things.
2 or 3 hours?
At least.
Tell you what, I'm going to go get some whiskey, and I'm going to pull my hair out, and I'll be right back.
That's a long, tough conversation.
It is. That's really
I know you're an inquisitive guy, and I know from spending time with you that you don't shy off of any topics to discuss. And I know that you have strong faith. So if you're like me, and I know in many ways you are because I've talked with you, I'm sure you have a button that someone can push to where you feel the need to respond. I mean, if someone's around you, someone close, I mean, if it's someone you don't know, you can just walk away. Yeah. But when someone that you know in an intellectual capacity tries to say, all this silly God nonsense, I mean, science is, we know because of science there is no God. Surely you have to have an elevator pitch as to shut that down. I mean, you can't just walk away and let that pass. You don't seem like the type of guy that would do that.
No, I'm not. I would tell them to prove it.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's just in short, just prove it.
Just prove it. If you're saying there's no God, prove it.
And then their response is always, science cannot prove what doesn't exist, only what does. And then my response is, then why do you say that God doesn't exist? It's
a circular argument.
It is a circular argument.
Well, to say definitively that God does not exist, it implies that you know everything about everything.
Right.
And therefore you know that God doesn't exist, which therefore means you are God. So the only way you can be a true atheist and declare with certainty that God does not exist is if you are in fact God himself. So it's kind of a self-defeating argument. Again, you can't prove one way or the other. However, when it comes to science and the scientific facts or whatever, just areas of interest that are most convincing to me is simply consciousness, because a human body is made up of trillions upon trillions of atoms and molecules and cells, and yet we're conscious, but we're not conscious of each individual aspect of our body. We are more than the sum of our parts. So, what is a memory? It's like from a space, matter, energy perspective, a memory makes no sense. So it has to exist beyond space, time, energy. Exactly.
Right. Right.
So what he's bringing up is also memory, mind. None of that is material.
Yeah. That's
all immaterial things.
Right.
But I think everybody would agree that they exist. Ideas. What is an idea? That, a decision. These things exist to us, to each person.
It's like love.
Yet,
when you tell someone, do you love your wife? And they say, well, yeah, I do. Okay, prove it. Well, you can't prove it. Well, you can't hook a machine up to somebody to say, do you love them? And if I say you don't love your wife, you can't prove it. I can hook a lie detector. I can check for deception, but you're at the end of the discussion, your argument's going to be, look, you may not be able to see it, but it's there. I know it's there. It's there. I know it. I just know it's there. And I think there's a lot to be said about God existing in a realm similar to that requires the belief, the faith, and the knowledge. Because for people who are deep in their faith, they stop looking at it like, oh, I believe it, Because believe insinuates someone it's optional. But to a lot of Christians, or people that are close with God, it's not something. Belief is never a choice. They get to the point where like, I know this is real. Just like when you say, you love your wife. Yeah, look, it's there. Just because I can't show it to you or prove it to you doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It is there, and I think that in many ways, the presence of God is like that. I think the more we learn about science, I can't speak for everyone, but I know certainly for me, the more I've learned throughout my life. I'm no scientist. I'm not even on one of the upper shelves, but and I understand about us being limited to the senses that we have, the 5 senses. All we do is take in information through these, like an octopus has 8 arms. We have 5 senses. All information is taken into this conscious that we have through those senses. And there are things going on. There's rays going through the air right now. There's Wi-Fi. There's all kinds of invisible signals, things we can't see. We can see less than 1% of the light spectrum. So we don't really see anything. We just see photons bouncing off of things. And people have this arrogance to say, well, it doesn't exist. If I can't get it through one of my 5 senses, then it doesn't exist. That's, when you talk about evolution, and we have to invent machines to see things. We have to invent night vision or thermal imaging or telescopes. There's so much going on that we can't see. The more I learn, the more I see how blind we are, literally. And people rely on these senses to prove what is real. And I've used this analogy, and I'm certainly not the first one, but it's like the cartoon character using all of the available information within the cartoon to disprove the cartoonist. I don't believe it's just a circular argument. I think it really puts the ignorance of man's arrogance and pride on display. I mean, it's incredibly backwards way of thinking to say, I've got these senses, I can obtain all this information, and therefore it's not likely that there's a supreme being. That just sounds insane to me.
Using your 5 senses, that's how the ancient world proved that the Earth is flat. Just using your 5 senses.
Yeah, that's right.
Go outside to the flattest area near the ocean, and you look from far to your left to far to your right, and it is flat. There's no question about it. And you even go up on a high mountain overlooking the ocean, it's still flat.
It is, and there's flat Earth society people now.
And
What are you people? On dope?
They think they're teaching everyone that there's a whole. Have you seen these people? Have you heard of them?
Actually, there's one of the most aggressive proponents of flat Earth just renounced it and said, "Okay, he's convinced." So his name is Ranti, R-A-N-T-I.
So he came back out and
he finally said, "Okay, I'm convinced." It was based on a photograph, just one photograph where he could not explain it other than.
That'd be a hard day at work, wouldn't it? You go into work and people are like, "Hey, man, you still doing that flat Earth stuff still got your website going on?"
I have people skills. I am good at dealing with people.
Okay, man. Yeah, there's a few out there like that. So he turned back around.
Yeah.
Have you met flat Earth people, Dave? You ever met one in real life?
I met some, yes, especially in Texas.
Especially, how did Texas get into the art? There's a lot of flat Earth.
Well, yes, I was raised in West Texas, and there's a lot of flat earthers out there, and that's because Texas is so flat.
So that's
there are some out there, yes.
Is that what they say? Hey, man, just look at this.
Exactly what they
Can't you
say.
see it's flat?
That's exactly what they say.
That's incredible. That's an incredible way to go through life.
Yeah, but still, in the ancient world, that's what they did. They, you look at the Earth; it's flat. Water comes out of the sky. They had no concept of the water cycle, that the water evaporates, goes into the clouds, comes out as rain. They didn't have any of that, so they felt like, oh, the windows of heaven open and the water comes in from above, and then someone comes out and says, oh, we're actually moving on a sphere at 1,000 miles an hour. if you're at the equator, by the way. And so you step outside. Do you like get blown off your feet by 1,000-mile-per-hour wind?
Please,
well,
no,
obviously
no.
not. Therefore, that's a bunch of bunk, right? So, yeah, it's when you limit yourself to your five senses, you're going to come to some pretty incorrect conclusions.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people who are anti-God think about.
Yeah.
You know, when you Dave was talking, you were telling me, being someone who's a physician, you're a lot closer to a lot of things than most folks get to know. We had a conversation once where you were talking about just, I think, the miracle of childbirth.
Yes.
And how there's something inside of you that when you respond to that, there's a God element inside of you that goes, there's something bigger going on than just.
You can't deliver a baby and not see a miracle. But even if you trace that baby back to the point of conception, that's a miracle in itself, that two objects can come together and make a human being.
I agree.
And to say that is not a human being, that's not a living organism, is nonsense. Because what does it take for life? It takes air, it takes water, it takes food. All of that is provided by the mom.
Right.
All of that is provided by the mom. Now, how you get it is a different matter. But it doesn't matter because that's what's required. But I can tell you, in all the years I've probably delivered close to 10,000 babies, I have never, ever, in any of those times, delivered an alligator from a woman. Every baby I've delivered has been human.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what grows inside of a human. And people who the abortionists who say that life begins at such and such and such and such, they say that they're only sentient after a certain age. We can't judge that.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
I mean, we have films from Sweden where probes were put into the morula stage, which is about the size of a dot on a piece of paper, and when it's millions of cells already, they put an electrode in there, and they turn on a small amount of electricity, and the morula actually collapses away from it. And that's before it even has shape other than round. That is a human being reacting. Now, you can't tell me that morula doesn't feel something.
Right.
That's a human being. It may not look like a human being, but it will.
Yeah. And you're not going to get any disagreement from me on that. All right, go ahead.
You know, Kevin's idea of the mind is things that you can't grasp was very interesting and very correct. We take our five senses, we put them together, and what we come up with is preconceived, or however you want to argue, but it's a thought. And a thought can never be material. I mean, how big is a thought? What does it weigh?
Right.
It doesn't. It's there. Why do we have thoughts?
I agree.
Who gave us thoughts? Who allowed us to have thoughts?
Yeah. It's not just random neurons firing. And that, yeah.
It is not.
No, it's not. And those are the type of things that I don't understand. People, even brilliant scientists who are actual scientists, even neurological scientists, can dismiss God. And I know now because of their knowledge. Let me finish the sentence, but I know we talked about Ibn Alexander, his book. He was a kind of a closet atheist, and had a wife and kids and a family. He would pray to be polite at dinner time, but secretly he thought this whole God stuff's a bunch of nonsense until he had a coma and experienced some amazing things, and then came back and told his colleagues, listen, this is real. Not only is it real, it's more real than this life, and we have to look into this. So now some of them are looking into consciousness. I know they don't, they can get discredited if they use words like soul and things like that. So they say consciousness. Where does your consciousness go? And didn't you, if you don't mind telling real quick, you told me a story once about an experience you had with someone who passed, right?
Yeah, I worked in an emergency room all those years, and of course people would come in, they're having heart attacks, they're having strokes, whatever. Many times I had to pronounce them dead, or I tried to save them, and I could not. There was one particular case where I was one of the ways you test to see whether people are responding or alive is by, do they have a pulse? Do they have an electrical impulse? Are they breathing? Do they respond to pain? But the other way is to look into their eyes. Now you take a bright light and I shine it into Kevin's eyes right now, they're going to become pinpoint. But when a person dies, the iris expands to where it's oval. You can barely see the arcus around the pupil. I was looking at a guy's eyes and and I had my hand on his chest, and he was breathing. And I was looking right into his eyes, and right in front of me, that iris went from pinpoint to open. And at that moment that it opened, I felt a shock in my left hand. And I thought the nurses had shocked him again. So I asked the nurses, "What'd you do?" And they go, "We didn't do anything." As soon as that eyeball became fully dilated, I felt the shock. Something shocked me from that body.
I
Can't tell you what it was.
Like an
But
exiting.
It was
like
it was something that forced my hand off of that chest.
right. I mean,
And
that's
I was
something
in-
you never forget.
I was in shock. I had to leave the room. I had to go off and think about that for a little while, because I just witnessed someone, spirit and soul, being a human being, they have both, leave the body. How many people get a chance to witness that?
Yeah,
That's not.
no. I certainly haven't had an experience like that. I am fascinated with. I have books on it, and I talk with Kevin about it a lot, and I've spoken with you about it. And to me, it's a fascinating topic because it's real. It's like C.S. Lewis made a statement once about how, we're not a body that has a soul in it. We're souls that have custody of a body. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't agree more. I add the word temporary, though. I say we're souls that have temporary custody of a body. But I love the subject. I'm fascinated with it. It's completely biblical. So to experience that, I think that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, it was something I will never forget.
Oh, I have no doubt.
But it's something also I don't normally tell people, but now I have told it all.
Right. Okay. Oh, well, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
But you did.
Yeah.
But
that's something worth sharing. I think people are richer for hearing those things, and I think that's an amazing experience. I think some things that happen to us we shouldn't keep to ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to ask you any more questions about anything that you've disclosed. I didn't think you ever said, don't tell anybody this or don't bring this up, because if you say that, I won't do it.
There's certain things that people don't like.
Yeah.
That are pretty close to the heart. Can I ask Kevin a question?
Yeah, go right ahead, man.
Kevin, you are an actual scientist. You've done actually scientific stuff at NASA, with GPS and so on and so forth. Do you think, is it your opinion, that God wants us to practice science?
Absolutely. I feel God created science. He created the world. He created our brains. He gave us curiosity. He gave us rational thought to figure things out. I don't see how you could think otherwise. Our entire beings as humans is a desire to learn.
That's the smartest thing I've ever heard anyone say about anything.
And that's true.
Okay, so what you're saying is that God wants us to participate in science.
Absolutely. God created an incredible universe, and he's not trying to hide it from us. It's like it's God's works. The more we see it, the more we investigate it, the more awed we are by God and his power.
As he says, the heavens are telling the glory of God.
Exactly.
When do you think science began? Like the laws of physics, laws of gravity, and so on and so forth. Where do you think they began? Think about it. I'm not asking for a definite answer. I just want your opinion. Do you think they started at the creation, or they existed before that?
Well, I don't know that we could ever answer that because we are limited, like the cartoonist, or like the
character in the cartoon within the
We are within the creation, so there are a lot of cosmological concepts that try to go beyond the Big Bang, or is it a bouncing cosmology, quantum loop gravity? If you wanted to
the string
investigate
theory
that.
and all that. But let's go beyond the Big Bang.
Can you?
No, actually, I can't. But would those laws have been extant before the Big Bang?
Possibly in the mind of God.
There you go.
I mean, but we have no way of knowing. I mean, are there even other universes where God has experimented with different laws of physics?
Well, why would God want to experiment?
We don't know.
Would he experiment if he knows all?
We don't know. That's the problem.
No, we don't. But
He could be.
I don't think God has to experiment.
Well, that will.
I don't think he.
But
Anyway, go ahead.
I mean, this universe may not be the only one. We just don't know. And I mean,
yeah, right.
This is everything to us.
I know, Dave. You have an education in theology. It seems like you're going somewhere. I want to know what your thought process is on that.
no, I'm not. I'm really not. I'm curious to talk to a real scientist.
Okay, all
Over
right.
here, I'm not a scientist.
No, I'm not either.
I'm a physician, and a physician is not a scientist.
Right.
A scientist is someone who thinks beyond the human body and the human. What I know is has to do with enzymes, parts of bodies, and chemicals that nobody's ever heard of.
Sure.
And now I'm reading about stuff that I never heard of 40 years ago, and I went to med school. But here's a guy who's been through all of that, who's actually worked for NASA.
He won't tell me anything. I try to get secrets.
I don't want his secrets.
I do. I want them all.
I want his knowledge.
Nothing to do with NASA's secret.
Right.
But the fact that you feel that God wants us to explore, I could not agree more.
Well, that's good.
But there are people who would say otherwise.
Yes, I'm aware.
Aware of that. I'm sure you are.
Yeah, that's the type of folks we talked about at the beginning of the conversation when, the God of the gaps is the phrase you use. Don't ask questions, just believe. Just don't ask questions. That's dangerous.
The God of the gaps is understandable. And I can understand it if I was an ancient Greek 2,000 years ago, and there was lightning from the sky, and they go, "What caused that?" Well, nobody knew about electricity then, so they said, "Well, God did it." But that's a whole, their idea of God and our idea of God are two entirely different things.
Well, right, because maybe I wouldn't agree with that example because the Greeks, depending on where, they were all different. They were scattered everywhere, but Greek Athenians, believed the pursuit of knowledge was. Even the Athenians who were upright thinking and would meet to talk about philosophy and science kind of thought this God stuff, Zeus and all that, was nonsense. And it was for peasants, really. but they thought the pursuit of knowledge was important. But I digress. I know what you mean. There are things that we say, well, God did it. But I think it's more responsible to say I don't know than to say God did. God, it's only dangerous when you say, stop asking questions. I mean, if you want to say God did that, well, I mean, ultimately you'd be right, I suppose, or God approved of it, or God allowed it, or however. But to say, stop looking into something, and then to me, that's the God of the gaps. It's where you fill the gaps with God, and you close the door to any further pursuit of looking into it. And that's what I think's wrong.
You think that being wrong is seeing that there are some questions out there that we don't know and saying we don't pursue them because only God knows that.
Yeah, I think it's wrong it's wrong to stop pursuing knowledge because here's an example. Okay. There's a lot going on right now with Congress recently gave issued orders for the naval intelligence, for the military intelligence to disclose everything they know about UFOs within 180 days. So coming up in June should be a pretty big report. Now, I've heard people in the past say things like, "Oh, if there were aliens, we couldn't tell people because it would rock the religious institutions. It would change people's beliefs. It would change." And I was talking to my wife about this. I said it wouldn't change my beliefs at all. Not one thing would change. I wouldn't say, "Oh, there's no God because there's aliens." There's no Jesus Christ because there's aliens. I would still retain my faith in God, retain my faith in Christ, my understanding of sin because I'm a product of it. I see it everywhere. I know it's real. It wouldn't affect my religious beliefs. I would just say, well, all that is true, and now look, there's aliens. I mean, that doesn't affect me. And so, should we pursue that to find out if that is a reality, if it's truth? Well, sure, we should. We absolutely should. If you're going to let the discovery dampen or diminish your faith was never that strong to begin with. I mean, that's my take on it. So I don't think we should ever stop pursuing knowledge. I think it's God ordained. I think, and to go back to what I was saying a second ago about how I read a lot about these folks that have these near-death experiences, and a lot of them, I don't read the ones that are sensationalized who are trying to make money. I try to read the ones who are written by pretty responsible people, scientists, physicians, pastors, to line them up with what the Bible says. And and there are some things that exist across the board in a lot of these experiences. Some elements of their experience. And one of them is that when they have this happen and they're on the other side, so to speak, they're asked, "What did you learn?" And they said they know, it isn't with words, but they know they're being asked that, and with the idea that learning is good, that you should keep trying to learn. And I could expand on this conversation. We could do a whole podcast about life after death, but I think it's important. I think it's responsible, and I think learning and seeking knowledge is something that pleases God, not for the purpose of, saying God doesn't exist, not to be used against God. Obviously, that's what Satan, the adversary, the energy in the universe that is evil, Lucifer, wants us to do. But I think God loves it when we pursue knowledge.
I think instead of aliens, bringing it back to a very real area of science, which is controversial, is abiogenesis, which is, can life come out of non-life without an explicit act of God? And it is an active area of science right now. So they're looking into all kinds of ideas. The Urey something experiment of 1953, I believe, that has been going on, where they put a bunch of chemicals into a sealed container and hit it with electricity, and they found that certain amino acids would appear naturally. Well, okay, you have to go the next step. So over the last 70 years or so, there has been ongoing research. Can you develop life from non-life? I have no problem with that area of science, simply because if they find out that it's impossible, there can be no better proof of the existence of God. And of course, you get into even the most basic cell. It has thousands of interdependent proteins that have to exist for the gene expression.
Yes, 3.2 billion.
3.2 billion nucleotide bases in a DNA, the genome. I don't want to get too detailed here, but just even the most basic.
I like the way you talk.
Even the most basic cell, it's the chicken and egg problem, because you need all of these proteins which allow the DNA to express the genes to create the proteins which it needs to, it's like they're interdependent. So is there a way that they can develop independently Like right now, they're looking into the RNA world. Can RNA come into existence? Somehow get into a method of creating proteins in the absence of DNA, which then gets wrapped up in something cell-like. And is it even possible? And it's a challenge, and it's a very challenging area of science. And I think it's great. It's hopefully it'll turn out like the Michelson-Morley interferometer.
I'm trying to understand everything that you're saying.
My name's Forrest Gump.
I'm trying to stay.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Well, we could get into a discussion of DNA and
proteins,
genes,
and their interdependency,
and codons, and
I read an article that discussed this, trying to create something from nothing, and they're like, well, what scientists are going to do is take these two particles, and I thought, well, wait a minute. I thought you said something from nothing. Those are two particles.
There's something.
There's something, right? I mean, nothing plus nothing will always equal nothing. So the only thing you get something is if nothing plus something. And so I know that can sound incredibly, like I'm oversimplifying it, but to me it is simple.
Yeah. Well, all the experiments so far, they've done computer simulations, and every experiment they've done, they have inserted information through the programming, which targets an outcome that they're trying to get to. It's like, well, wait, that's exactly what you're trying to prove. And yet you're putting the information in, so you're getting information out. What you need to do is get information out from complete randomness. And that, it's like, well, how do you do that? And it's interesting to read about. And as I said, it's probably going to turn out to be just as big a failure as the Michelson-Morley interferometer, which is a fun thing that mean physics teachers do to their students.
I've never even heard that term.
Pay attention when I'm talking to you, boy.
So it's what does that mean?
All right. Michelson and Morley, I don't remember the time period, probably early 1900s or 1800s. They wanted to measure the ether. They had finally determined that light was a wave, or it had a speed. So every wave in history had to move through something. So they assumed that space was made up of something.
Right.
Sorry, I'm falling asleep here.
No, sorry. I'm trying to stay with you, but yeah.
So anyway, they created an interferometer, which it was meant to measure the ether that light moves through. And, if the Earth is moving around the sun, it's like 65,000 miles per hour or something. Going one direction, you should be able to measure it. And the way if you really care about how it worked, it was a big disc on a.
What do you mean? If I really cared about? Do you think
on a bed of mercury?
Are you saying dum-dums like me should probably don't?
I can handle things. I'm smart. Not like everybody says. Like dumb, I'm smart, and I want to spit.
And when he says ether, he's not talking about that which puts people to sleep.
Right.
Well,
right.
Maybe I was. It worked.
No, well, it worked in his case, yes, but ether scientifically has a different.
But it was probably the most famous failed experiment of all time, because they fired this thing up and it measured absolutely nothing. It didn't matter which way the Earth was moving around the sun or anything. Well, that's because there is no ether. So, physics professors will, have their students build this. And some of the students who don't know what they're doing, they'll say, I can't get this thing to work.
Right.
Because it doesn't.
So it's a cruel trick.
It is a cruel trick.
It's a cruel trick. Okay. All right. And then kids probably work diligently trying to impress their professor.
Yep. But there's a really good chance that abiogenesis will result in the same thing. It'll be a massive failed experiment if they cannot figure out any way that non-life can come into life. So I think it's great.
We had our version of jokes like that for us non-science folks. It's called snipe hunting and go get me the wall stretcher, and there's all kinds of. Yeah. So now out in the country we put that kind of trick on a lower shelf.
Yeah.
Shot a few snipes.
It's not in a lab, right? Yes, I shot some snipes.
There have been some close calls, however. I think it was Dawkins and his group that were able to. Whoops, I'm touching something.
That's all right.
Were able to measure a particle of electricity or something in what they called a vacuum. Well, it turned out the vacuum was had a low energy field. Well, then the low energy field is still something.
That's right.
It's not nothing. I don't care how low it is. It's still something.
I agree.
So that went out the window. That was the closest. That's one of Dawkins' argument for years until somebody told him, "Wait a minute, low energy field is something," and then he dropped that. Much, so to speak, or somebody turned off.
Dawkins is not widely regarded in the atheist community. He's just the most known.
Vocal.
Yeah, most vocal, most known.
Neil Tyson. I always get his name. Is it Degrassi Tyson or Tyson?
Neil Tyson DeGrasse, I believe.
That guy, I find him interesting because he doesn't believe in anything. I mean, he makes Carl Sagan look like Billy Graham. I mean, he doesn't believe any. Everything is strictly numbers with that guy. I mean, he's an intelligent man, very smart guy, but I don't know if you've ever heard him talk or listened to him.
Yes, and you discover quickly that Tyson believes in Tyson.
Yeah, yeah, that's his. Yep, that's right. Can you get a little closer to your mic, just a little bit?
Can I bring Muhammad to the mountain?
Yeah. So to kind of stay on topic, but move. You told me one time we were having a discussion about you were talking about your background and your education and things like that, and I think you know a lot. You specialize, if I'm not mistaken. I don't even, maybe you even taught on about how many different denominations there are of the
Protestant. 46,000. There's one every 5 days.
Yeah.
In the United States, I don't know about worldwide.
Yeah, I mean the reason I think that's relative to this topic is because of the things we're talking about. I don't know. New schools of thought popping up constantly. And I think I have to wonder how many of them do the God of the Gaps thing. How many of the new religions say, don't ask questions, just believe? I don't know. Protestants, by and large, I think, you can't talk, I don't know. A lot of folks talk about denominations, and they assume that the denominations today are still the way they were.
No, they're not.
No. They're completely different.
No.
And
but I can't speak as a Protestant, so I have to leave that up to you guys.
Yeah, I struggle with the denomination. That's another podcast. So I didn't mean to go down a rabbit hole there, but it made me think about all the different worldviews. There's so many. So, but for today's purposes, we're talking about God and science, and I think the Christian stands in the camp with both. I think we clutch our Bibles, keep our faith, believe in God, but still own a microscope and a telescope. And I think that's the responsible way to live. I think that's what God wants us to do. And I think that the people, I think the biggest disbelief, earlier you were saying that, and I think you echoed this sentiment, that the majority of people that are atheists that you've encountered are ex-Christians and they're mad at God. And I agree with that. And furthermore, I think that I tell people all the time, and I know you guys have heard people say this. They say, man invented God to control human behavior. And I think that is the silliest thing I've ever heard in my life, because first of all, look out the window and tell me how that's working out. It's not working out. And secondly, if man had it his way, there'd be no God. Man wouldn't invent God. Man would write God off and get him out of the picture. So there would be no accountability. And I think that speaks to this idea of people being angry with God and going towards atheism, because I think that that's what they want to do. They're not just mad at God. They want to erase God. And they think if they can do it in their mind, if I say it enough, it'll be true. And even if that may be a subconscious thing, I think it goes a little deeper than just being angry with God. I think if they can start to believe their own
Yeah, what is it? Goebbels said, if you tell a lie long enough times, it becomes truth.
And
People believe that it's true.
anyone will believe it.
Yeah, anybody will believe it. But I specifically speaking with people, we would have no trouble at all with God and religion if they just get rid of the sixth commandment.
The sixth commandment.
Thou shalt not commit adultery. If you just got rid of that one, we would be happy. There wouldn't be any atheists because everybody believes in the Ten Commandments are good.
Right.
And don't steal, don't covet, so on and so forth. But there's that one little nasty one in there having to do with
the flesh.
The flesh.
Yeah.
And and people look at that completely backwards.
Yeah.
Because God only gave us 10 rules, only 10 that we have to follow. That means there are millions and millions of other things that we can do.
Well, I think there was originally a lot more than 10, but yeah.
Well, I'm just going. I'm not going to argue the point.
Sure. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That was one of my relatives, and Moses walking down the mountain. He's one of the ones that dropped it.
Okay.
But I was raised. My mother was Jewish, and she was a.
So I have to issue a correction here. When you said the sixth commandment, I was going to say, "Thou shalt not kill."
Don't. Which one is thou shalt not commit adultery?
7.
7. Okay,
It's
7.
like, you really threw me off. I thought, wait.
I got it mixed up. See,
What is wrong with you?
I don't know. I should have paid closer attention when my mom sent me to Hebrew day school.
Yeah.
Instead of sneaking out the window and going surfing.
Okay.
but I could have been wrong because it's been so long since I went through the list and.
It's been long since I've been through the list.
Anyway.
But what that has to do with God and science is, I think we can all agree that God wants us to investigate. I think God wants us not to touch the microphone. I think God.
Mine has an electric shock on it, so I can't touch it.
Right.
You should put that on mine. I really think God wants us to inquire. I think He wants us to know as much as we can.
I do.
I don't think He put us here to occupy space.
No, I think so. I think experiential learning. The acquisition of knowledge is part of experiential learning, and I think it shows that you're worth your salt. You're worth your weight in alpo. You know, you're walking the earth and doing something, contributing. You're one of the most valuable things we do in our humanity is teach and help other people. Well, everything that you teach and every way that you go about helping other people, you accomplish because of something you have learned. So. Learning is a way of adding more gears to your life, and hence adding more gears to the world and making the lives of others better. Even if you're a jerk and you don't want to talk to people and you don't want to do anything, but you spend your time learning and you teach at a university, you're passing on information, you're passing on knowledge. Provided what you do is noble and has integrity, like I said, even if you're a jerk, even if you're an atheist, God can take anything bad and use it for something good. I think learning... it's part of the human experience for exactly what you just said. He didn't put us here just to take up space. Do something. And everything that we do has to be done from what we've learned and what we continue to learn, I think.
You look at me, I
have nothing to add.
You have nothing to add? Okay. Well, I don't know where we are on our schedule here. Oh, we're over. Wow, that flew by.
Yeah.
What do you mean we're over?
Well, we're not really over. We can do whatever we want, but we try to stick around an hour. We're at an hour and 8 minutes. So let's get back to this stuff about aliens. Now, I wonder how you were talking about being from Texas and they think the Earth's flat. I'm waiting to see how they approach the.
We go riding into town. A whopping and a whopping. Every living thing that moves within an inch of a trunk.
Blazing Saddles, Seth.
There we go. So that is, on an afterthought before we close, it is interesting that we got that report coming around the bend from any guesses before we close out on what they're going to say, what the intelligence community is going to disclose about. Now, it's not about aliens, just to be clear. It's the truth about UFOs. Congress wants the truth. They don't want any more sidestepping Project Blue Book nonsense type stuff. They want the facts. Because of those videos, I'm sure you've both seen them from the Nimitz and from the fighter jets of those crafts.
And the most recent one out of San Diego.
Yeah. Is that the pyramid one?
It's the one where whatever it is goes
back into the water. Yeah. And they're what's the word? Transmedium.
Yeah.
They can go the same speed in water as they can in air, which I think I have a theory on that, but I'm not gonna. That'll take forever for me to go into it. But what do you think they're going to say? Any guesses? What the report will say?
I've never worked in the CIA, nor have I ever worked with secrets.
No, but you have heard.
I would defer to him. However, if you're asking my opinion on that,
Sure.
I would have to defer to one of the Jesuits who works at the Pontifical Observatory in Tucson, who, when asked a question, "Are there aliens?" and he said, "I don't know." And they said, "Well, if an alien landed." And they asked, would you baptize them? And he said, only if they ask. I don't know. And I just don't, I don't know.
Only if they ask.
Only if they ask.
Right.
In other words, he didn't know either.
Sure.
There's only one way to prove anything is true is to see it. If you see an alien, you know there's an alien. Otherwise, you're running around looking, I don't know where an alien is. Maybe it's out in space, and I'm in the front of a planet, and I know I go around to look in the back, but the alien's coming around and look in the front. I never know he's there.
I know.
It's like I never see the other side of a tree.
We don't know what dimension.
We only see half a fourth. But I never see the side that I don't see.
Right.
So how about they're going to say? I would leave to the man who's done that cloak.
Yeah, he might. For all we know, he's got a secret bat cave under his house, and he's writing the report. So.
I know all about it.
Do you?
I can't tell you, or I'd have to kill you.
You'd have to kill us, yes.
Any speculation as to what they might say when they release their report? I have a pretty strong opinion on what I think is going to be said.
No, I don't really have any idea because I haven't followed it. So I haven't really followed UFOs since I was in college, high school. I used to read a little bit about it.
So that puts me on the dodo level again. Okay, all right.
Just hasn't been an interest.
Right.
The problem is with this is that the people who are aliens are writing about aliens. So I never know. I don't know what's going to happen. The only real aliens I know are in Congress. Or work for them.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a snappy comeback for that. Yeah, that's true.
There are too many to choose from.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, there's a bunch of them in there that you can't understand the way their language or.
I'm going to digress slightly. We're in a situation.
That sounds
President
alien.
asked me to head up a cancer.
Sounds like.
No, that don't make no sense.
Yeah, there's some.
Anyway, I interrupted you. You were giving your opinion.
Oh no! I was headed that way. Just given the history of the government and intelligence and the relationship between those institutions and the general public, I just think that what will be said will be, hey, we have determined that there are unidentified flying objects or unidentified aerial phenomena, and we're looking into it. And I think it's just going to be a longer, more sophisticated version of Project Blue Book. And they're going to say, we're looking into this. I know that there's a lot of people that say they're going to show us pictures of the aliens and underground bases and all this craziness. I'm not looking for that to happen. I am looking for what I think is going to happen is there will be some reports. They will, I'm sure, be a real fun read for someone. But I think it's going to be evasive and boring, and it's going to say, yeah, we have footage of some odd things out there in our airspace, and by golly, we're going to check it out. And I think that's going to be the gist of it. Now, it would be wonderful if there was more to it than that, but I think it's going to be a long-winded, over-complicated way of saying what I just said. And
I'd be surprised if most of it wasn't redacted somehow.
You never know. You never know what to think. So, okay, you guys want to, in closing out, what would you like to say before we wind down here at the end?
Well, I pretty well said it all. I think we pretty much agree that God expects us. God wants us to be inquisitive, to use the brains that He gave us, to come to logical conclusions. And I agree with Copernicus and Galileo and all those other guys. much smarter than any of us, that we should do all of this for the glory of God.
Agreed. I agree.
I don't think we ought to do anything in science without at least saying, I'm doing this for the glory of God.
Agreed. I agree. Good point. Good thought. What about you, Kevin?
Well, I'd have to agree with everything you said, but I'm also disappointed that we didn't get into relativity and, general and special relativity. In Sunday school once I explained the math behind special relativity because it was really, really easy. Now, general relativity is not that easy,
No,
so
that's right.
I didn't address
It's
that.
not even straight. It curves.
So, anyway.
By the way, you were talking about light particles.
Yes.
You realize now that light particles they are also particles, and they are also waves.
Well, yes, of course. The
Yeah,
double slit experiment.
Yeah. Now, how do you explain that?
Well,
Mr.
Obviously, it's quantum physics.
It is quantum physics, which of course can't correlate at all with relativity.
Why not?
It just can't be done.
Yeah, buddy,
But who-
I can't get a word in edgeways.
Well, we're going to have to continue this discussion then on the next podcast.
I would like to meet somebody who could do that.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, it's. I agree with everything you said. Our brains and our rational thought are here to be used. God didn't give us such a gift and expect us to hide our heads in the sand and just say no. It can't be no. So, and I agree. It should all be done for the glory of God. But I think that division between science and God has been driven home by the fundamentalist movement, primarily Protestant, since Catholics are pretty open to scientific advancement. But
yeah, I'm sorry, I was making your closing statement there. I would agree with that. Human folly exists on both sides of the fence. It exists in all of humanity in terms of, atheists, their faults, and certainly in religion who handles the questions irresponsibly. And like what you just pointed out, some of those who don't, to me, that just cries out from the entire human condition as a whole, the need for God. So I think, we've been created to need something, and there's always a way to meet the need. You get, and a way to pervert the need. You get hungry, God gives you food. Satan gives you gluttony. You get thirsty, God gives you water. Satan gives you drunkenness. You have a sex drive, God gives you marriage. Satan gives you fornication. You get tired, God gives you rest. Satan gives you laziness, sluggard, and I know that for everything we have a need for, that there's a way to meet the need. And I think the deepest need that mankind has is to know God, and therefore that need can be met. And so I think it's just a matter of those who are willing to go towards it, to meet it, to get it met, or those who, as we discussed today, are angry and want to run from it and try to erase it for whatever their own, personal reasons may be. So, okay, I think that's going to do it for our discussion today. I want to thank Mr. Dave Lindsay and Kevin Johnson for stepping in here and talking with us about all this stuff. It's been a wonderful conversation. So we're going to close out with that. I want to thank everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time on Small Town, Big Life. And I'm sure these guys will be back in the future for us to do this again. Yeah, will you come back, Dave?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. All right, cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. God bless.